I'm sure you can agree with me that the idea of relocating is exciting, because when you start thinking about relocating, you look forward to new experiences, new opportunities, opportunities to grow, broaden your horizons, and to just experience other cultures and so forth. It is exciting, and that's exactly how I felt when I moved from Zimbabwe to the United Kingdom. I was looking forward to so many things, and I can think of many success stories, stories of those immigrants who relocated from their countries of origin and moved abroad and gone on to do great things, things that we talk about today. However, there is a flip side to that. And I can guarantee that everyone who relocates from their country of origin to another country, whether it's UK, US, Canada, Australia, wherever, everyone who relocates or travels to another country will experience this challenge. And the challenge that I'm talking about is culture shock. Now, there is a lot that comes with culture shock, but the most important thing to remember about culture shock is that it's normal. It's normal for someone who moved from their country of origin to live in another country. It is quite normal and expected that you will experience culture shock. It's also important to remember that culture shock is not one specific thing. Rather, it's a mixture of different things. It's a mixture of habits, experiences, and encounters in your new environment. It consists of things like the different accents that you're likely to come across, because I remember when I came to the United Kingdom, I struggled with the Scottish accent. At one point, I remember I was on the phone and I was talking to someone, and I kept on saying, "Pardon? Excuse me? Sorry, would you mind repeating that?" I could not hear what they were saying at all. But over time, I got used to the accent. And another aspect of culture shock can be in the food as well. That is another area that I struggled with when I came to the UK. I struggled with certain types of foods, like there was a difference in taste and so forth. Another aspect of culture shock is just the local customs and traditions and how people do things, their way of life. It's bound to be different from your way of life, the life that you grew up knowing and experiencing. It is going to be different, and that is what causes culture shock. Another aspect as well of culture shock is just you feeling homesick when you first relocate to another country. You will feel out of place, you will miss home, you will miss all those experiences that you grew up knowing. You will miss that. So all those experiences and encounters are what culture shock is. And what culture shock does is it stresses you out. It makes you feel quite anxious, and it makes you feel less confident in social settings, especially even at work, because you're not quite sure how to behave, how to talk, and so forth. So that makes you feel less confident, and you hesitate to do certain things or to make certain decisions because you're not quite sure whether you're doing the right thing or not. And to be quite honest, for someone experiencing culture shock, life can feel so lonely and isolated, because here you are going through all this on your own. So I want to take you through the stages of culture shock that I went through when I came to the UK. And as I go through these stages, I'll be giving you some tips as to how you can navigate these stages and come out stronger on the other side. So the first phase that I went through when I moved from Zimbabwe to the UK is the honeymoon phase. I remember this phase so well when I moved to the UK. This is the phase where I was feeling excited. I was looking forward to the future, because here I was in the UK, the land of milk and honey, because that's what my friends had told me. They had told me great things about the UK, and I was looking forward to exploring those things. And during that time, wherever I went, whether I was going to town or to work, I was busy looking at everything, scrutinizing everything. I was looking at the buildings, the cars, the food in the supermarket. I was comparing everything to what I'd left back home, because I was excited being in this new environment where everything seemed different. So whenever I came across something, I would look at it, I would scrutinize and try and compare it to what I'd left back home. So for me, it was exciting. And I can say that I was seeing rainbows in the sky because life was so bright. So for me, this was my honeymoon phase. It felt as if I was on holiday. The second phase that I went through when I relocated from Zimbabwe to the UK was the frustration stage. Now, this is the stage where reality set in. This is where I started seeing things for what they really were. I started to miss home. I started to miss my family, my friends, because in my situation, I had left my daughter back home. So I started to miss her and my family, my friends, everything that I had known all my life. I started to miss that. And I also started to miss the weather because when I came, it was really cold. When I came initially, I was feeling excited. Even though it was cold, because of the excitement, I really didn't feel, it didn't hit me at the time. I think the excitement took over. So during the honeymoon phase, the cold didn't really affect me that much. But during this frustration stage, that's when I started feeling it. That culture shock really set in. I started to miss the food because, as I said in the beginning, some of the food tasted kind of funny. I say funny because it tasted different. It wasn't what I was used to. My palate wasn't used to the food. So it hit me. Everything kind of hit me all at once. And also, I had started working through an agency. And back home, I had never worked through an agency all my life. And I had never done care work because that was my first job, care work. So at first, again, I was excited to be working, to be earning those pounds. The pounds that my friends had told me about. My friends had actually told me that, oh, if you do so many hours, you'll be earning at least 200, 300 pounds a week. So in my mind, I had calculated how much money I was going to earn. So I was excited at first. I wasn't thinking about anything else except the money. But during this phase of frustration, I began to feel those long hours because back home, I wasn't used to working those long hours and being called up at odd hours. Because I remember at one point, I was about to go to sleep and the agency called me. They said, oh, Betha, we have a night shift. Can you please go and do it? Because I had not done a shift for 2 days. I was just waiting by the phone. I had to jump at the chance. So over time, that started to get to me and at work as well. People spoke differently and I wasn't used to some of the behaviors, some of the expectations. I wasn't quite sure and I wasn't feeling confident because I was having to adjust and to adapt. I was still adjusting and adapting to my new environment. Even though I was fluent in the English language, there were certain nuances of that English language that I was experiencing for the first time. There were certain mannerisms, certain ways of speaking, certain ways of expressing yourself that I wasn't really accustomed to. So I was having to learn to adapt and to adjust. So I struggled with that during this phase. As I said, this is the phase where reality set in. So the most important thing to remember about this phase is that it's normal. It will pass. It won't always be like this forever. You just have to tough it out, I'm afraid. And also during this phase, you might feel sad, anxious, frustrated, and out of place. And at times, you might feel belittled as well when people jump in to correct you. Whenever you say something and maybe you say it the wrong way or you don't express yourself in the manner that they are used to, and then they jump to correct you. You might feel belittled. You might feel as if people are making fun of you. And this stage is quite challenging. I have to say it is quite challenging and you can actually sink into depression if you're not careful. So the best way to cope with this phase is to share your experiences with other immigrants or expats, because you will find that as you share your experiences, you give each other pointers and you develop ways of coping. You give each other tips as to how to navigate this phase. And also as you share your experiences, your feelings and your emotions with other immigrants or expats, you discover that actually you're not the only one who's dealing with this. And sometimes you can even laugh about it. So that is why it is important to share. Don't keep things bottled in. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing your experiences with other immigrants or expats, you can share your experiences with people back home. As you make those phone calls back home, talk to them about how things are going, how you're feeling, and so forth. That way you relieve the pressure and anxiety. So sharing is a pretty good way to deal with this phase of culture shock. Now, the next phase that I dealt with when I moved from Zimbabwe to the UK was the adaptation phase. Now, this phase usually happens around 6 to 9 month mark, but for some people, things might take longer. And for some people, things might take even less time to get to this stage of adapting. Now, this is the phase where you really need to be resilient. You really need to be intentional about how you go about things. Because if you're going to thrive in your new environment, you need to adapt. There's no way that you can enjoy life if you don't get to this stage. This is the most crucial phase, and this is the phase that you want to master. You really want to master this phase because unless you overcome culture shock, unless you learn to adapt to a new environment, you cannot thrive in that environment. This is the phase where you really need to confront things and to understand why things are happening the way they are happening, and to understand why it is that you're experiencing what you're experiencing, why you're struggling to cope. You need to pay attention to your new environment. In my situation, I had to be intentional about everything. I had to take the time to learn the new ways of doing things in my new environment. I had to pay attention, really pay attention to how things are done in this country, to how people talk, or to what I was expected, to those expectations. I had to pay attention. And also I had to observe how people behaved, how people talked, how everything was being done. So I had to pay attention, and also I had to make a conscious effort to assimilate into my new environment. You assimilate into your new environment by developing a healthy curiosity about your new environment, developing a keen interest in the customs, cultures, and traditions of that country. To really become involved in that community, you need to become part and parcel of that community by participating in the events, in whatever is going on around you. Try and participate. I know it is hard to take that initial step, to get involved, to make a contribution to your new environment, to your new community. But once you get through that initial phase, you'll find that things become easier. And also one thing that I've realized as well, despite the challenges, despite the barriers, what I've realized as well is that sometimes it all depends on our attitude. If we approach things the right way, with a positive mindset, with an open mind, you'll find that people will receive you well. People will be receptive as well. And another thing as well that I want to mention is that it's important to be patient in your new environment. Give people time to get to know you. Give people a chance, because it is normal for us as human beings to resist something that is not familiar to us. We kind of try and keep a distance. If we see something that we are not used to, or something that we are not familiar with, or something that is different, we tend to kind of shun. Maybe shun is not the correct word, but we kind of want to suss things out first before we can embrace it. So that is why I say that you need to give people a chance and time to get to know you, to get used to how you speak, how you do things. And you'll find that over time, people will get used to you, how you talk, how you behave, and everything about you. And they may come to actually love your uniqueness. So it is important to remember this during this phase, because this is the most crucial phase of them all. Because unless you adapt and adjust to your new environment, you cannot thrive in that environment. So that's why this is the most important phase of them all. So when you get to this phase and you're able to adapt to your new environment and get over that culture shock, then congratulations, you've got a chance. You have a chance to thrive in your new environment. And after this phase comes the acceptance phase. Now, this is the most enjoyable phase of them all. This is the most satisfying phase. This is the phase where you've completely embraced your life. You feel secure. You feel confident in everything that you do. You now understand how things work. You understand why you do things, how you need to navigate things. You understand everything fully. And of course, you always miss home, because home is where the heart is. You always miss home. I always miss Zimbabwe. I miss everything about Zimbabwe. I miss the weather. I miss the food. I miss everything about Zimbabwe. You always miss home. But at the same time, you are able to function fully in your new environment. You are able to make a full contribution to your new country. With that being said, we've come to the end of this video. And I want to end by asking you about your culture shock experience. What sort of things did you experience when you moved to the UK or US, Canada, South Africa, wherever it is that you moved to? What has been your experience? And of course, as always, don't forget to like this video. And if you haven't subscribed, then consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.